Jake Morrison stood in chains before the biggest alien court he had ever seen. The metal around his wrists burned his skin, but he did not care anymore. For 300 years, his people had bent their knees to these creatures who ruled the galaxy. Earth was nothing more than a farm to them, and humans were just animals who could work. The courtroom was huge, like a giant cave made of shining metal. Above him sat the aliens who decided if people lived or died. The Zephyrians looked like walking crystals that threw light in all directions. The Moravians were big slugs that left acid trails wherever they went. The Cricks looked like giant bugs with eyes that saw everything and judged it all as trash. High Arbiter Zethkalar was the crystal being who spoke for the court. His voice was like music, but Jake knew it was the same voice that had sent thousands of people to die in the mining camps. The crystal alien began to speak, and his words echoed through the giant room. Human Jake Morrison, you are here because you would not let us change your body. You made other humans angry at us, and you destroyed our ships. These are very bad crimes. Jake lifted his head and looked right at the crystal creature. The body changes were meant to make humans weak and easy to control. They had already done this to people on Mars and the space stations. Earth was supposed to be next, and Jake would not let that happen. I did not destroy your ships to start a war, Jake said in a clear, strong voice that everyone could hear. I destroyed them to show you something you forgot. The crystal alien seemed interested, and his body flashed with different colors. What did we forget, human? We might be young and weak compared to you, but we never learned how to give up. We will not start learning now. The courtroom became very quiet. All around the galaxy, people were watching this through secret video feeds. Mining stations and research bases and even merchant ships were all seeing their representatives stand up to the most powerful beings in space. Jake had been a normal ship captain before all this started. He ran cargo between Earth and the outer colonies and tried to keep his head down like everyone else. But when the hegemony announced they would start changing human bodies to make them more obedient, Jake could not stay quiet anymore. The first time he had spoken against it was at a meeting on Europa Station. Commander Amy Sullivan had been there along with other human officers who served the alien government. Most of them had looked uncomfortable when Jake stood up and said what everyone was thinking. They want to cut into our brains and change how we think, he had said. They want to make us into pets who are happy to be slaves. Is this really what we want for our children? Some people had agreed with him quietly, but most were too scared to say anything. The aliens had cameras everywhere, and people who spoke out had a way of disappearing. But Jake kept talking, and more people started to. LISTEN Dr. Ben Carter had been one of the first to join him. The scientist worked at the Titan Research Center and knew exactly what the genetic changes would do to human minds. They are not just changing our bodies, he had told Jake during a secret meeting. They want to remove our ability to feel angry or rebel. We will become like happy robots. That was when Jake decided to act. He gathered a small group of humans who still had fight in them, and they began to plan. Captain Lisa Torres brought her ship and crew. Engineer Holly Martinez provided technical support. Colonel Dan Rodriguez came with his Special Forces team. They were not many, but they were determined. The attack on the Hegemony patrol fleet had been desperate and dangerous. Jake's small group of ships went up against alien warships that were much more powerful. They should have been destroyed in minutes, but humans had one advantage the aliens did not expect. They were willing to sacrifice everything. Jake had rammed his ship directly into the alien flagship while his crew escaped in pods. The explosion took out 3 more ships and sent the rest running. It was not a great military victory, but it was something more important. It was proof that humans could still fight back. Now he stood before the court that would decide his fate, and he was not afraid. The Crystal Arbiter was speaking again about punishment and death, but Jake barely listened. He was thinking about all the humans watching this moment and hoping they would understand what he was trying to do. You will die for your crimes, human, the Arbiter said finally. Let this be a lesson to your species about what happens to those who resist. Jake smiled and looked right at the crystal creature. Let me tell you something, Arbiter. In all your years of conquering planets, have you ever wondered what happens when the prey decides to become the hunter? The Arbiter did not answer, but Jake could see uncertainty in the way his crystal body flickered. The other aliens in the court looked uncomfortable too. They had ruled through fear for so long, they had forgotten that fear could work both ways. You can kill me, Jake continued. You can kill 100 humans or 1,000 or 1,000,000, but you cannot kill what I represent. You cannot kill the idea that we deserve to be free. The guards moved forward to take him away, but Jake kept talking. His voice echoed through the chamber, and he knew it was being heard on every human station and ship in the galaxy. We are not your pets. We are not your slaves. We are human beings, and that means something. It means we will fight even when we cannot win. It means we will die before we kneel. And it means that no matter how many of us you kill, there will always be more who refuse to submit. The execution was broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other species about what happened to rebels. The hegemony wanted everyone to see what defiance brought. They wanted fear to keep their subjects in line like it always had, but something went wrong with their plan. Instead of creating fear, Jake Morrison's death created something much more dangerous. It created hope and anger and determination. It reminded humans everywhere that they had once been a proud species that explored the stars because they refused to accept limits on mining stations and research bases and merchant ships. Humans watched their representative die with dignity and courage. They saw him refuse to beg or apologize or ask for mercy. They saw him stand straight and proud even as the alien weapons charged up to kill him, and in that moment something awakened in the human spirit that had been sleeping for 300 years. The fire that had once driven them to leave Earth and explore the galaxy began to burn again. Jake Morrison was dead, but what he represented would live on and grow and spread until the galaxy itself would burn. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Sullivan watched the video of Jake Morrison's death for the 10th time. She stood in the command center of Europa Station staring at the screen as her friend died with more courage than she had ever seen. Around her, the other humans were quiet, but she could feel their anger growing like heat from a fire. The execution had been playing on every screen in the station for 6 hours. The alien government wanted everyone to see what happened to rebels, but their plan was not working. Instead of fear, Amy saw rage in every human face around her. The spark that Jake had lit was about to become a wildfire. Sergeant Pete Hoffman walked over to her with a datapad in his hands. His face was hard and angry like everyone else on the station. "Ma'am, we are getting messages from all over the system. The mining colonies on Titan and the farm stations on Ganymede and even the diplomats on Luna, they all want permission to stop cooperating with the aliens." Amy looked out the window at Jupiter spinning below them. The giant red spot on the planet looked like an angry eye watching everything. She had served the hegemony for 15 years because she thought cooperation was the only way humans could survive. Jake Morrison had shown her how wrong she was. "Send a message to every human installation in the system," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Tell them to cut all cooperation with alien forces immediately. We are going to show them what happens when humans get angry." The rebellion started small, but it spread fast. Cargo ships carrying metals to the crystal alien homeworlds just disappeared into the asteroid belt. Research stations stopped answering when aliens called them. Human workers on alien ships started having accidents that broke important equipment. Dr. Ben Carter was leading the smartest human scientists at the Titan Research Center. For years he had been forced to work on weapons for the aliens who ruled them. Now he gathered his team and told them they had a new job. "Forget everything the aliens taught us about playing by their rules," he said. "Humans were always good at one thing, and that was finding new ways to fight our enemies." The first human strike came 3 weeks after Jake's death. Captain Lisa Torres led a small fleet of converted cargo ships against a Krix supply base near Saturn. The bug-like aliens expected an easy fight against primitive human ships, but they got a nasty surprise instead. Lisa had learned from Jake that humans did not need to fight fair. While the Krix prepared for a normal space battle, her ships came at them from all directions using the asteroid belt for cover. They used mining explosives instead of proper weapons and suicide runs instead of careful tactics. The Krix base was destroyed in 2 hours and not a single human ship was lost. Lisa's report to the growing resistance was short and simple. They are not as tough as they pretend to be. They're just used to fighting against people who follow rules. We are about to show them what happens when we throw the rules away. All across the solar system, humans were waking up from 3 centuries of sleep. On Mars, the colonists, who had already been changed by alien science, started fighting back anyway. Even with their modified brains, they could not forget that they had once been free. Colonel Dan Rodriguez led a special team to rescue human prisoners from the Moravian labor camps on Pluto and brought back stories that made even hardened soldiers cry. The slug-like Moravians had been using humans as living tools for their acid mining operations. They would inject people with drugs that let them survive in the poisonous atmosphere and then work them to death. When Dan's team hit the camps, they found thousands of humans who had been turned into something barely alive. We got there too. Late to save most of them, Dan reported to Amy during a secure transmission. But the ones we did save told us things about alien treatment centers that will make your blood boil. They are not just enslaving us. They are experimenting on us, like we are lab rats. The rescue missions became recruitment drives. Every human who was saved from alien camps became a fighter who would never surrender again. Engineer Holly Martinez set up hidden factories in the asteroid belt that turned mining equipment into weapons. She worked with teams of mechanics and technicians who had been fixing alien machines for decades and now knew exactly how to break them. We cannot build ships as good as theirs, Holly explained to the resistance leadership. But we do not need to. We can build ships that are cheap and fast and dangerous. We can build 100 ships for every one they make, and we can throw them away like bullets if we have to. The psychological effect on the aliens was huge. For centuries they had seen humans as smart animals who were useful for work but not dangerous in a fight. Now these same animals were destroying their fleets and raiding their bases and, worst of all, making other slave species think about rebelling too. High Arbiter Zethkalar called emergency meetings every day as reports of human attacks kept coming in. The crystal alien had sentenced Jake Morrison to death, thinking it would end the problem, but instead it had made everything much worse. In the crystal chambers of the Zephyrian homeworld, the leaders of the hegemony tried to understand how their perfect system was falling apart. How is this possible? Demanded Supreme Chancellor Morathai. Her crystal form was flashing with angry colors. They are one small species on the edge of our territory. We rule 12 species across 10,000 worlds. Zethkalar had been studying human behavior since the rebellion started, and what he learned worried him. We made a mistake, Chancellor. We thought that because they were weak, they would always stay weak. We did not understand that some species get stronger when you try to break them. The rebellion was spreading beyond humans now. The Krell were an ocean species that had been slaves for 2,000 years. They watched the humans fight and started asking why they could not do the same thing. The Vortons were rock creatures who had never thought about freedom before, but seeing human courage made them wonder what they were missing. Even some of the hegemony client species started having doubts. The Nexari had been loyal servants for 5 centuries, but now they whispered in their crystal cities about whether the humans might be right. If primitive humans could challenge the hegemony, maybe it was not as strong as everyone thought. Amy Sullivan found herself in charge of a growing fleet of converted ships and angry humans who wanted to fight. She had never planned to be a rebel leader, but Jake Morrison's example had shown her that sometimes people had to step up when history called them. Standing on the bridge of her command ship, she looked at the tactical display showing human forces all across the solar system. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Roy Mason from the communications station, "we have confirmed reports of uprisings in the Alpha Centauri system and the Volf system. The humans there saw what we did and decided to follow our lead." Amy nodded, but she knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would not give up their empire without a fight, and they had weapons that could destroy whole planets. But Jake Morrison had proved something important when he died. He had shown that there were things worth dying for, and freedom was one of them. "Send a message to all human forces," she commanded. "Tell them that Jake Morrison did not die to start a rebellion. He died to remind us who we really are. We are the species that crossed the ocean in wooden ships and reached for the stars in metal ones. We are the people who never learned how to quit." The galaxy was about to learn what humans could do when they stopped trying to be civilized and remembered how to be dangerous. 6 months after Jake Morrison died, the galaxy was burning, and Admiral Kate Brooks could see the fires from her command ship. She stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching a fleet of slug-like Moravian ships scatter before her forces like scared animals running from a predator. Kate had been a cargo ship captain before the war started, but now she commanded the biggest human fleet ever assembled. The ship around her had been built in secret factories hidden in the asteroid belt using stolen alien technology and human determination. It was not as advanced as alien warships, but it was faster and meaner and crewed by people who had nothing left to lose. "Give me a status report," she called to her bridge crew. All of them were veterans of the corporate wars that had happened before the aliens conquered Earth. They knew how to fight dirty, and they were not afraid to die for their cause. Lieutenant Commander Roy Mason worked at the tactical station with his fingers moving fast across the control displays. 15 Moravian destroyers are disabled or destroyed, Admiral. We have no human casualties. The surviving ships are running toward the Kepler system. Kate nodded, but she did not smile. Victory felt good, but she knew the aliens were just getting started. The hegemony controlled thousands of worlds and billions of soldiers. The humans had maybe 10 million people spread across dozens of small colonies and converted ships. They were winning because the aliens had never fought an enemy like them before, but that advantage would not last forever. The human rebellion had spread far beyond Earth's solar system. In the Alpha Centauri colony's engineer Holly Martinez was working 18 hours a day to solve their biggest problem. The aliens had cut off all supply lines to human territories, which meant they had to make everything they needed from scratch. "We cannot match their technology," Holly explained during a video conference with resistance leaders across human space. "But we do not have to. We can build more ships than they can, and we can adapt faster than they can think." Human manufacturing had changed completely since the war started. Every factory and 3D printer and construction robot was working around the clock to build weapons and ships and equipment. But more important than that, humans were taking alien technology and changing it in ways the original makers never imagined. Colonel Don Rodriguez led the Special Forces unit that everyone called Morrison's Ghosts. They were experts at sneaking onto alien ships and stations and turning the enemy's own weapons against them. Don had learned that every alien species had weaknesses they did not even know about. The crystal beings look tough, but if you hit them with the right sound frequency, they shatter like glass, he explained to his troops before a raid on a Zephyrian command ship. The bug aliens are strong, but their armor has gaps at the joints. The slug aliens dissolve their own equipment if you make them angry enough. The psychological impact of human tactics was devastating to the hegemony. For thousands of years, they had conquered species by following the same pattern. They would show up with superior technology and force the locals to surrender. Any resistance was crushed with overwhelming firepower until the defeated species accepted their place as slaves. But humans did not follow the normal pattern. They did not try to fight fair battles they could not win. Instead, they used guerrilla tactics and suicide attacks and dirty tricks that made no sense to alien military thinking. When they lost battles, they did not surrender. When they lost ships, they built more. When they lost people, they got angrier. The Krell were the first non-human species to openly join the rebellion. They were ocean dwellers who had been enslaved by the hegemony for 2,000 years. Their leader, Commander Ryan Cooper, had been watching human tactics and decided his people could learn from them. "The humans showed us something we had forgotten," Ryan announced to the Galactic Council during a broadcast that shocked the entire galaxy. They showed us that being weak does not mean you have to stay weak. They showed us that some things are worth dying for. The Krell uprising began with coordinated attacks on hegemony installations throughout their home system. They used the same tactics they had learned from watching humans fight, hit and run attacks followed by quick retreats, suicide bombs that destroyed key facilities, propaganda broadcasts that inspired more people to join the fight. The Vortons were next to rebel. They were silicon-based creatures who lived on high-gravity worlds and had always been loyal servants of the crystal aliens. But seeing the Krell break free made them start asking questions they had never asked before. Doctor. Grace Thompson had become humanity's chief diplomat to the growing coalition of rebel species. She found herself in the strange position of helping former enemies work together against their common oppressor. The meetings were held in secret locations that moved constantly to avoid alien detection. 6 months ago, I was a research scientist, studying alien biology, she told her staff during a briefing. Now I am helping to write the constitution for a new galactic government. Jake Morrison would probably laugh if he could see what his defiance started. But the hegemony was not sitting still while their empire fell apart. In the deepest parts of their core worlds, they were building something that intelligence reports called the Pacification Protocol. Human spies who infiltrated the construction sites came back with stories that made even veteran soldiers nervous. Captain Paul Jenkins commanded one of humanity's best reconnaissance ships and had been tracking hegemony secret projects for months. His latest report sent shockwaves through the resistance leadership. They are not trying to beat us in battle anymore. They are building a weapon that will make rebellion impossible for any species in the galaxy. The Pacification Protocol was more than just another superweapon. According to the stolen data, it was designed to broadcast a signal that would change how intelligent brains worked. Any species that was exposed to it would lose the ability to feel anger or resentment or the desire to fight back. They would become perfectly content slaves who never even thought about freedom. High Arbiter Zethkalar had approved the project after months of military defeats had made it clear that conventional warfare was not working against the human-led coalition. The crystal aliens stood in the secret facility where the weapon was being built and watched thousands of technicians working to complete it. How long until it is ready? He asked the chief engineer. 3 months at most, was the reply. Once we activate it, every rebel in the galaxy will become docile and obedient. The uprising will end without us firing another shot. But the humans were not planning to wait 3 months. Amy Sullivan had been promoted to general and now commanded all human military forces. She gathered her top commanders for a meeting that would decide the fate of the rebellion. We have one chance to stop them, she told the assembled officers. We have to hit their core worlds before they can finish their mind control weapon. It will be the biggest battle in galactic history, and most of us will probably not survive. Colonel Don Rodriguez spoke up from across the table. Jake Morrison knew he was going to die when he made his stand. That did not stop him from doing what was right. Captain Lisa Torres nodded in agreement. We always knew this fight would cost us everything. The only question is whether we make it count. Admiral Kate Brooks looked around the table at the faces of people who had become legends across a dozen star systems. Then we go out like humans should, fighting until the very end and taking as many of them with us as we can. The orders went out across human space and allied territories. Every ship that could fly and every person who could fight was called to action. This would be the final battle that decided whether the galaxy stayed enslaved or broke free forever. Jake Morrison had started a fire with his defiance, and now that fire was about to consume everything, the only question was whether anything would be left standing when the flames finally burned out. 2 years after Jake Morrison's execution, the war had spread to every corner of the galaxy. General Chris Hamilton stood in the command center of humanity's secret base, hidden deep in the Veil Nebula, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Red zones marked areas where fighting was happening right now. Blue zones showed hegemony strongholds that were still under alien control. But the yellow zones were what worried Chris the most. These were systems where the conflict had grown beyond simple rebellion into something much more dangerous. The entire structure of galactic civilization was breaking down. Intelligence. Chief Nancy Baker walked over with the latest reports from across the galaxy. Her face was tired but determined after 2 years of coordinating spy networks and resistance cells on 1,000 different worlds. The Krell have taken complete control of the Antares sector, Nancy reported. The Vorton Collective has declared independence from the hegemony. We are getting reports of uprisings in at least 40 other systems, and the number keeps growing every day. Chris nodded, but her expression remained troubled. The rebellion was succeeding beyond their wildest hopes. But success brought new problems. What about the core worlds? Are we getting any intelligence from Hegemony Central Command? Nancy brought up a new holographic display showing the inner regions of the galaxy. This is where it gets really interesting, General. The Zephyrians are facing internal rebellion for the first time in their recorded history. Apparently some of their younger crystals are questioning whether galactic domination is worth the cost of holding it. The war had evolved far beyond what Jake Morrison could have imagined when he made his defiant stand before the alien court. Humanity had become the catalyst for something that had been building for thousands of years. A complete transformation of how the galaxy was ruled and who got to make the decisions. Commander Ryan Cooper led a mixed force of humans and aliens in the Outer Rim territories. His crew included Krell warriors who fought with savage determination and Vorton engineers who could repair any piece of technology ever built. There were even a few Zephyrian defectors whose crystal bodies had turned dark when they rejected their own government. You need to understand something, Ryan explained to new human recruits during a training session. This stopped being about human independence months ago. We accidentally started a revolution that is going to remake the entire galaxy whether we want it to or not. The proof of his words could be seen in every star system where the fighting had spread. Species that had been enemies for millions of years were now working together against their common oppressor. Ancient grudges were being set aside as everyone focused on the bigger goal of freedom from hegemony. Dr. Grace Thompson found herself in the unprecedented position of helping to draft the charter for what would become the Galactic Free Alliance. The meetings were held in the ruins of a former hegemony administrative center with representatives from over 50 different species working side by side. The irony is not lost on me, Grace told her assistant during a break in the negotiations. Jake Morrison refused to let the aliens change his DNA, and now we are helping to change the genetic structure of galactic politics. But the hegemony was far from finished. In the deepest reaches of their core worlds, they had completed construction of the pacification protocol. The weapon was more terrifying than anything they had ever built because it did not destroy bodies. It destroyed the will to resist. The device worked by broadcasting, a psychic frequency that could reach every intelligent mind in the galaxy simultaneously. Any species exposed to the signal would lose the ability to feel anger or resentment or the desire to fight back. They would become perfectly content with whatever situation they found themselves in, even if that situation was slavery. Captain Paul Jenkins had been running reconnaissance missions into hegemony space for over a year, trying to gather intelligence on their secret projects. His latest report sent shockwaves through the Free Alliance leadership. They are not just trying to beat us anymore, Paul reported during a secure video conference. They want to erase the very concept of rebellion from the galactic consciousness. We need to hit them first, and we need to hit them with everything we have. Admiral Kate Brooks now commanded the largest fleet in Free Alliance history. Ships from dozens of species had joined together under human leadership because humans had proved they knew how to win against impossible odds. Standing on the bridge of her flagship, she looked out at a formation of vessels that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "we are receiving final confirmations from all fleet commanders. The Krell Armada is in position. The Vorton Construction Corps has finished the assault platforms. Even the Zephyrian defectors say their crystal ships are ready for battle. Kate nodded and opened a galaxy-wide communication channel. Her words would be heard on every rebel ship and base and colony across thousands of star systems. My name is Kate Brooks. I am human. 2 years ago, one of our people named Jake Morrison refused to submit to tyranny. Today we finish what he started. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the galaxy, millions of voices from dozens of species raised a battle cry that had never been heard before. They were not just fighting for their own freedom anymore. They were fighting for the right of every intelligent being to choose their own destiny. But Dr. Ben Carter and his team of scientists had been working on something that might give them an edge in the coming battle. Deep in the hidden laboratories of the Titan Research Center, they had developed a weapon unlike anything ever built. We call it the Liberation Catalyst, Ben explained to the Alliance leadership during a top-secret briefing. It does not kill people or destroy ships. Instead, it awakens minds. Every intelligent being it touches becomes capable of true free thought and permanently immune to any form of mental control. The implications were staggering. If they could deploy the Liberation Catalyst before the hegemony activated their pacification protocol, they could turn the enemy's greatest weapon against them. Instead of creating perfect slaves, the aliens would accidentally free every oppressed being in the galaxy. General Chris Hamilton looked at the tactical displays showing hegemony fleet movements toward their core worlds. How long do we have before they are ready to use their mind control weapon? Intelligence estimates 2 weeks at most, Nancy Baker replied. After that, they can end every rebellion in the galaxy with the push of a button. The final preparations began immediately. Every available ship was called to action for what everyone knew would be the decisive battle of the war. The Free Alliance fleet that assembled in the outer regions of hegemony space was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. But it was not just about numbers. The mixed fleet of humans and aliens represented something that had never existed before. Species that had been conquering and enslaving each other for millions of years were now united by a common belief in the right to be free. High Arbiter Zethkalar watched the enemy fleet approach his home system and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The crystal being who had sentenced Jake Morrison to death now faced the consequences of that decision as it played out on a galactic scale. How many ships do they have? He asked his tactical officers. Intelligence reports over 10,000 vessels of various sizes, was the reply. But that is not the worst part. They are led by humans who have never lost a major battle since this war began. Zethkalar remembered the defiant human who had stood before his court 2 years earlier. Jake Morrison had warned them about what would happen when prey became predator. Now the Arbiter understood exactly what those words had meant. The galaxy held its breath as two incompatible visions of civilization prepared for their final confrontation. On one side stood the hegemony with their ancient belief that order required absolute control. On the other side stood the Free Alliance with their new belief that intelligent beings had the right to choose their own path. Soon everyone would learn which vision would survive and which would burn in the fires that Jake Morrison had lit with his refusal to submit. The final battle for galactic freedom began not with massive explosions or planet-killing weapons, but with a single message, broadcast across every inhabited system in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by officers from a dozen different species, all united by their refusal to kneel before tyranny. My name is Kate Brooks. I am human. 3 years ago, one of our people named Jake Morrison refused to submit to oppression. Today I am here to finish what he started. The words echoed through space, carried by quantum communication networks that the hegemony themselves had built. On millions of worlds, billions of intelligent beings heard the declaration and felt something stir in their hearts that had been sleeping for far too long. The hegemony's pacification protocol was ready for activation. Deep beneath the crystal cities of the Zephyrian homeworld, the massive device hummed with power that could reach every corner of the galaxy. High Arbiter Zethkalar stood before the control console that would end all rebellion with a single command. "Once we activate this, no intelligent being will ever want to fight us again," he told the technicians around him. "They will be content with whatever place we give them in our perfect order." But the humans had learned something important during their 3-year war against the galaxy's masters. They had learned that the best way to defeat superior technology was not to build better weapons, but to think in ways your enemy could never predict. Dr. Ben Carter had spent months studying captured hegemony equipment and had discovered something. The aliens did not know about their own communication networks. The same quantum channels they used to control their empire could be used to carry other signals as well. "We call it the Liberation Catalyst," he explained to Admiral Kate Brooks during the final mission briefing. "When we release it through their own networks, it will reach every intelligent mind in the galaxy simultaneously. Instead of making them obedient, it will make them truly free." Commander Ryan Cooper led the assault on the Hegemony Core worlds with the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species flew together in perfect formation despite having been enemies for millions of years. The sight would have been impossible to imagine. Just 3 years earlier, the battle was less about superior firepower and more about superior determination. The Free Alliance forces fought with the desperate courage of beings who knew they were fighting for something more important than their own lives. They were fighting for the right of every intelligent creature to choose its own destiny. Captain Lisa Torres commanded the strike force that broke through the final hegemony defenses around the Zephyrian homeworld. Her mixed squadron of human and alien ships cut through the Loyalist fleet like a knife through paper. The enemy fought well, but they were defending an old idea, whose time had passed. On the surface of the crystal world, the final confrontation took place in the same chamber where Jake Morrison had been sentenced to death. High Arbiter Zethkalar made his last stand surrounded by the few guards who remained loyal to the dying empire. Lisa and her assault team broke through the doors of the crystal chamber with weapons ready, but the Arbiter did not try to fight them. Instead, he stood before the console that would activate the pacification protocol and looked at the humans, who had brought down his perfect order. "You were right," he said to Lisa as she approached with her weapon trained on his crystal form. "We never understood what we were fighting against." Lisa kept her weapon steady, but her voice was calm. "Jake Morrison tried to tell you. We do not fight because we are strong. We fight because giving up is not something we know how to do." The Liberation Catalyst was deployed at the exact moment the hegemony tried to activate their mind control weapon. Both signals raced through the galaxy's quantum networks, reaching billions of minds in the same instant. But instead of creating perfect slaves, the combined effect created something unprecedented in galactic history. True freedom of thought spread like wildfire through every inhabited system. Beings who had never questioned their place in the universal order suddenly found themselves capable of imagining different possibilities. Species that had served as enforcers for centuries began asking why they had accepted such a role. The result was not chaos as the hegemony had always predicted. It was awakening on a scale that no one had ever imagined possible. Within days, the ancient empire collapsed not through military defeat but through mass enlightenment. Worlds that had been content as resource providers began demanding representation in their own government. Species that had fought each other for millions of years started working together to solve common problems. The transformation was so complete that within a month the galaxy was unrecognizable. General Chris Hamilton found herself dealing with requests for membership in the Free Alliance from species she had never even heard of. Worlds that had been silent for thousands of years suddenly came alive with voices demanding to be part of the new order. A year later, Ambassador Grace Thompson stood in the same chamber where Jake Morrison had been sentenced, but now it served as the meeting hall for the Galactic Congress. Representatives from over 200 species gathered as equals to discuss their shared future rather than receive orders from their masters. "Today marks the first anniversary of the Liberation War's end," Grace announced to the assembled delegates. "We gather not as conquerors or conquered, but as free beings choosing to work together. In the crowd, she could see familiar faces that had become legends across the galaxy. Amy Sullivan now served as Earth's military representative, helping to train peacekeeping forces that maintained order without oppression. Ben Carter headed the new Galactic Science Initiative, where former enemies worked together to solve problems that had plagued civilization for millennia. Ryan Cooper commanded the Joint Species Fleet that protected trade routes and responded to emergencies across thousands of systems. His ships carried crews from dozens of worlds, all working together because they had learned that cooperation was stronger than conquest. Don Rodriguez had retired from military service, but his special forces techniques were now taught at academies throughout Free Alliance space. The tactics that had once been used to fight oppression were now used to protect the innocent and stop those who would bring back the old ways. Holly Martinez ran the massive construction projects that were rebuilding damaged worlds and connecting isolated systems to the galactic community. Her engineering teams included species whose combined knowledge was creating technologies that surpassed anything the hegemony had ever built. On the wall behind the speaker's podium, a simple metal plaque bore words that had started the greatest revolution in galactic history. In memory of Jake Morrison and all who refused to submit. Some fires once lit can never be extinguished. The ceremony continued with reports from across the galaxy about the progress being made in every sector. Former slave worlds were becoming centers of learning and culture. Species that had been enemies for millions of years were discovering they had more in common than they had ever imagined. But perhaps the most important change was not in governments or technology, but in the way intelligent beings thought about themselves and each other. The liberation catalyst had not just freed minds from external control. It had awakened the understanding that every thinking creature had value and deserved respect. Arbiter Zethkalar had survived the fall of his empire and now served as an advisor to the new government. The crystal being who had once sentenced rebels to death was helping to write laws that protected the rights of all citizens. His transformation from oppressor to advocate showed that even the most rigid minds could change when exposed to freedom. I spent 10,000 years believing that order required absolute control, he told Grace during a private meeting. Jake Morrison taught me that true order comes from beings who choose to work together rather than being forced to obey. The memorial service for Jake Morrison was held every year on the anniversary of his execution. Beings from across the galaxy gathered to remember the human who had refused to submit, and in doing so had lit a fire that transformed everything. As Grace concluded her speech, she offered words that had become the unofficial motto of the new galactic civilization. We are all human now, not in biology but in spirit. We have all learned what Jake Morrison tried to teach us. Freedom is not something you are given. It is something you take. And once you truly have it, you will burn down the galaxy before you let anyone take it away. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter that day, as if the galaxy itself had finally learned to be free. Children of dozens of species played together in parks that had once been restricted to the ruling class. Scientists shared discoveries that had once been classified as state secrets. Artists created works that celebrated diversity. Instead of demanding conformity, the hegemony's greatest fear had always been that freedom would lead to chaos and destruction. Instead, it had led to the greatest flowering of civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Worlds that had been stripped bare were being restored. Species that had been driven to near extinction were recovering their numbers and their pride. Jake Morrison had died believing that humans deserved to be free. His sacrifice had proved that all intelligent beings deserve the same right.